That's your boy Gooch.
That is the homie Keas.
And this is the RogueHead Huddle with Gooch Keas.
First of all, let me tell you, I was glad to be back. I had a little vacation. We missed y'all. We have been just kind of relaxing for a little bit, but it's back to work. Make sure you go back and check out all of our other shows that we've done on RGR. Check out the RGR channel, the live stream on Monday. Shop at the merchandise store. The Athletic Matrix is out for all of y'all that are interested in the draft and everything. Keas has gotten the Matrix already. Seems to be a good look. I think I'm going to get mine soon. And we're back, so take this walk with us. Should be a good one.
Well, let's just jump right into it. It is now technically Saturday, early AM, and we are recording this with not quite 3 whole days of free agency, of legal, non-tampering free agency in the books here. Gooch, what are your thoughts on the Chiefs' roster moves so far?
Well, I mean, we got Juju, so that's a solid number 2. Justin Reed, I don't know much about, probably because it's the Texans. And all the highlights I could find fit into less than 3-minute clip. So I don't know what his leadership's like. I don't know. Is he here to replace Tyron? Is this a possibility that Tyron comes back because the market hasn't swallowed him up like everyone thought, including him? I mean, I have to think, in my personal opinion, I have to think that Veach, and you and I were talking a little bit about this off camera, I have to think that he has some moves up his sleeve, and he's kind of waiting on that final rush where, 1 or 2 year cheap deal we get you on. It's not going to kill our cap space next year. Because you have to remember, Mahomes' salary cap hit goes up again next year on this $500 million contract. So you're still going to need space. So if I was to grade it, I'd grade it incomplete right now simply because we don't know what's going on. But like you said, this is probably the first time we've ever seen Veach non-aggressive. So that's my take on it. You?
Right. Yeah, I think after his one press conference, and talking about the importance of building with the trenches, the expectation was that he was going to come out similarly to the way he came out last year and attacked the offensive line problem. I don't see Tyron coming back. We talked about it a lot that we speculated that it was definitely about the money if Tyron hadn't signed or came to an agreement on an extension. And then Tyron tweets a week ago that the Chiefs never offered him a contract. And if that's truly the case, then I think there's something bigger there. And all we can really do is speculate. We can speculate, did that come from Clark Hunt himself? Was the social media fiasco part of that? It'd be really weird if they didn't even have any kind of an offer made. Maybe they had discussions. He didn't say they didn't have discussions. His tweet just said that he was never offered a deal, which seems puzzling that they didn't even offer him anything. And so, I don't know, that coupled with how quickly they went after Justin Reed in free agency. And there were some other tweets that have came out since the season ended from Tyron's side, clearly that wouldn't have anything to do with the contract offer that you would have already expected to come, maybe even before um, the whole toxic fan base stuff kind of blew up. But there were other tweets that he had about Spags moving him around and kind of changing the position that he was playing, and that being part of the reason that he didn't have the same numbers. Um, Certainly, that wouldn't justify his soft play, his lack of tackling, his lack of wrapping up on tackles and sacks. Um, but I don't think those were the numbers that he was referring to in his tweets. But regardless, um, they clearly saw something in Justin Reed that they made him a priority in free agency. It's kind of a weird off season right now. I knew that we were going to have a lot of smaller roles re-signed. Probably, guys like Wiley, guys like Burton. You know, our exclusive rights free agents. I expected all of them to get tendered and be back. Just because they're cheap players and most of them had a role on this team. I absolutely hate the Frank Clark restructure. And I hate it for multiple reasons. I understand there are people out there kind of doing a sleight of hand thing. Brett Veach was kind of doing this sleight of hand thing, saying that this deal allows Frank to come back and play this season for less than he would have counted in dead cap space or the same amount or whatever. Um, the cap space, the dead cap space is the same or whatever it was that they were saying. But the reality is it's not exactly true because Frank most likely would have been a post June 1 designated cut, which means he would have counted 6.8 million against the salary cap this year and 6.8 million against the salary cap next year. And that's all dead money. It's money he's already been paid. He was paid it. This is this part of his cap number, his dead cap number from his original bonus that he got with the Chiefs. So there was no new money there. It was just dead cap space that could have been equally split 6.8 million between 2022 and 2023, and that would have been made available. The remaining space between Frank's original contract, his original cap hit this year was something like 26 million. So we would have gained about $20 million in cap space by cutting Frank post June 1st. 26 million or so that he had as a cap number this season. Nearly 20 million of that was non-guaranteed money that Clark Hunt was going to have to actually pay out. And the 6.8 million for this season and next season, it's already been paid out. It was part of his signing bonus. It just counted against each of the first 5 years of his contract. That's how it works. And so if we had cut him, we would have had 20 million in cap space this season and close to that next year in space saved. Instead, Frank's cap number this year, we can't. Before seeing the contract, I thought, you know what? If this allowed us to trade him, if it served like a dual purpose, if it gave us kind of a safety net, right? So that maybe Ingram comes back or not. If he doesn't, we're not necessarily in a bad position because we still have Frank, who's an okay edge. If we can't get a good one in the draft, at least we still have Frank. You know, if we were somehow able to sign a free agent edge, if we were able to sign Ingram, if we were able to draft a guy and fill our edges that way, maybe this would allow us to trade Frank. Well, Spot Track has the contract details in. and Frank's contract is not tradable this season. And because of that, I absolutely hate this because we could have had 20 million in cap space by cutting Frank post June 1st designation. And instead, I think his cap hit this year is something like 13.75 million. And so we essentially just cut his cap hit not even quite in half. So it's utterly irritating to me, combined with the fact that we can't even trade him this year because it would be something like, I believe, $21 million cap hit between this year and the guaranteed part for next year. Um, so yeah, I'm really frustrated with that. And right now, if you look at our defensive line, which was not able to get pressure, right? That was the big argument, the big frustration of Chiefs fans was we were not getting pressure with this defensive line. And yet, right now, we have half of the starting defensive line back, and we haven't done anything about improving the defensive line. If we were just able to bring back Reed and Ingram, all we've managed to do is be at the status quo of a defensive line that was not getting enough pressure. And the only justification I can see for that is if you're saying Brendan Daly was not a great defensive line coach, and the new guy, what's his name, Collins or whatever, is a fantastic defensive line coach who you expect to get way, way more out of the same players than Brendan Daly did. So I would see that as an utter indictment against Daly as a defensive line coach. Otherwise, you got to make moves that at least put you better than the status quo, which means you got to upgrade over Jerron Reed, and you have to find a way to upgrade over Melvin Ingram, who was our best edge rusher last year. So I'm not liking the defensive moves right now. I'm not even that big on the offensive moves, but I'm going to stop talking for now and throw it back to you because I feel like I'm doing a monologue, but I got a lot to say on this topic.
And before y'all bash us in the comments, please understand that Keas' feelings, which part I agree with, are the same feelings that you guys are expressing to Ryan and Dan and everybody else on RGR. We're just saying them out loud for you. So please don't berate us in the comments saying that we're beach bashing. We're not. We're just trying to figure out or maybe get an understanding of what the plan is. Because if you look at it, I'd like to think he has a plan in place. But as it stands right now, we've lost Ward. We've lost the Honey Badger. We replaced him with Justin Reed, but nobody to replace Ward. And we weren't going to pay that contract. Hitchens is gone. So right now we don't have a third linebacker unless you're going to bring up Dorian O'Daniel. Ingram's gone. Frank is restructured. And we've got Jones. And Mike Dana. Sorry, and Mike Dana. And there's the whole list. And the reason why I say we're not beach bashing, there's a whole list. And Keys had it 5 pages long of starter level talent still hanging out there. So I mean, we don't dream to know what's going on in Beach's head, but it's just a little mind-boggling when you're used to him being aggressive and just going out there and just like caution to the wind. I like this guy. Here's your damn contract. But we'll leave it at that, and we'll come back to it when the off season's over. You know us. We're on the huddle. We do it big. I mean, I like it, but we do it big.
Yeah, it's funny that I'm the one talking about Frank right now so much. But I think that's the biggest frustration. Um, Maybe it's disappointment, but there's certainly a lot of frustration there because you have to get pressure on guys. And the pressure to do so now has only gotten bigger. I mean, you can have the is it defensive line or is it, the cornerback, is it up to the defensive backs to what do you need to get to the quarterback? And in this case, we don't have either right now. And, this isn't, I'm not being hysterical. I'm not being reactionary here. As I've shared with other people who are freaking out for lack of a better word, it's like putting together a puzzle. And right now we can't see the full picture. So what we're doing doesn't look good and it doesn't look right. Um, and so you have to have some patience and wait for the puzzle to get put together. And then you'll be able to tell, is this a aesthetically pleasing puzzle or is it an absolutely ugly garbage puzzle? And so, that's the caveat, right? We don't know what the puzzle is ultimately going to look like. Do we hope that it looks great? Yeah. And the reality is that even when it looks good on paper, it doesn't mean it's going to look good in September or October or November or December, even in January. And that's true for all 32 teams. There are teams out there that are really excited right now, and their fan bases are really excited. I've seen enough football and I've seen enough off seasons to know that those teams can still look like trash. They can still be underwhelmingly terrible, like inexplicably. And so, just because things look good on paper, I mean, look at the Ravens, right? Over the last few years now, look at teams like the Ravens and the Chargers, who on paper had, you know, great teams, and then they had a whole slew of injuries. Um, but yeah, would I be approaching this offseason a lot differently? Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of us as fans are coming in at, and part of the reason for some of the hysterics by people. Again, we've talked about this before, but we're 2 years into a pandemic, and we're now 2 years off of a Super Bowl win, and we look for things in our lives that we can control, and we can't control, Patrick coming out in the second half looking absolutely terrible. We can't control a team and coaching staff to let the essentially the same thing happen to them twice against the same opponent. We can't control how Veach has attacked free agency, um, the timing of restructuring Patrick's deal or extending Tyreek, or whether or not we even restructured Frank. We can be angry about those things, but we ultimately don't have control over them. We can disagree, but we don't have control over them. And so, right now we're sharing our opinions. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. And again, we're sharing them with the perspective of, you know, where we have an incomplete puzzle in front of us and we're looking at the pictures and trying to make sense of what we're looking at. And so, with that said, I mean, my approach to this team and building this team is utterly different than what I'm seeing right now. Um, and that's fine. There'll be people out there say, "Well, you're not a GM." Yeah, that's true, but you know what? About a half dozen or so GMs get fired every year because they're not that great. So just because you make it to become a GM doesn't necessarily mean that you're competent to the position. This happens in all of life. There's an actual term for it, but people often rise to a position that's a level above their ability. And that's where their ceiling is. Think about that. People actually get to a level above their ability. They get to a level in their profession above what they're actually qualified for, and that ends up their ceiling, even though their ceiling should obviously be that level below, right? So, and I'm not saying that's Veach, but I'm just saying like when we're talking about GMs, just because someone becomes a GM doesn't mean they're qualified to be a GM. There's plenty of guys who get hired to be GMs who are not qualified to be them. Anyway, I'm kind of going off here on a tangent, so Gooch, I'm going to let you bring us back in.
Well, I think what the fear is from a lot of people is it was another thing that we spoke about off camera is that even at their worst, um, they had to play the worst second half of football. There had to be a complete collapse from other teams in the conference. They had to play the worst half of football that we've seen in a while, and they were still 30 minutes from the Super Bowl. I think what concerns a lot of fans is that while the rest of our division and conference are loading up, because even as it stands right now, the Chiefs are the betting favorite to get to the Super Bowl next year. So while everybody's loading up, it looks like we're standing pat. And in a conference where, in a division where Derek Carr is the fourth best quarterback in your division, when in every other division of football, he'd be second, or in the NFC East, he'd be first. He'd be the best quarterback in that division. Like it's you're already going to have to run murderer's row just to get to the playoffs. Um, and so I think what concerns fans is like, yo, Russ is in Denver now. Devontae's a Raider. Um, Herbert and them, they all that Herbert, the Chargers were missing a defense and they've loaded up. Khalil Mack is now with Bosa, J.C. Jackson over there playing corner. Um, People are just worried, and so like once again, we're not here to bash. We're really just here to talk and kind of put into words what everybody else is feeling without being overly emotional, um, without being the sky is falling. Um, Although I do want to point out there, if you're watching this, Kansas City Chiefs brass, Stephon Gilmore can cover Devontae Adams. I'm just saying, and he's a free agent.
Well, you've kind of taken us there, so we'll just go ahead and cover this. How are we feeling about the rest of the AFC West now that free agency has started? And you know, you brought it up, and we did talk about it off air, but I think there's something to be said to the fact that and Chiefs fans, we're interesting people, right? Because I think I got bashed in live stream chats and on Discord and the Discord game day chats in a lot of games for defending the defense. The same thing happened when Sorensen. When Sorensen had a game that was defensible, I defended him. When the defense had a fairly decent game or something defensible happened, right? Like their collapse was aided by the offense, like disappearing for a whole half or having a turnover, around the 50-yard line, things like that. to where, or, being 3 and out multiple times in a row to where the defense was on the field for a long time and getting tired. And I defended them, while a lot of Chiefs fans were quick to defend the offense and trash our defense. And a lot of those same fans now want to act like our defense is fine, right? And as you pointed out, the AFC West, and not even just the AFC West now, the AFC as a whole, especially now the AFC North, is that much more loaded. Like, basically, all the quarterbacks are in the AFC now, save Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, who both, look to have pretty easy paths to this, to, make it to the playoffs now. And so, all that to say,
I mean, and then to make you, Debo Samuel even said his road to the playoffs and Super Bowl is getting easier and easier because you've got Aaron, you've got he who shall not be named down in Tampa, and you've got Kirk Cousins.
I mean, you do still have Dak. However, I know there's a lot of mixed opinions on Dak. Um, but yeah, I forgot Dak, but I'd put him ahead of Cousins as well. Um, but outside of that, you know, as you said, in most divisions, and I said this before too, in most divisions, Derek Carr is probably the second best quarterback in those divisions. Now the AFC North has made moves since I first made that statement. Of course, he wouldn't have been the second best anyway with Lamar and with Burrow there, but he certainly would have been better than Mayfield, um, and no Ben Roethlisberger. And so, on the one side of things, you know, our defense cannot even be the status quo. And I'm not saying something like, I'm not being chicken little here, and I'm not being extreme in that statement. I'm not saying anything that basically every Chief fan hadn't been saying through the 2021 season, that our defense was not great and it needed to be better. And I'm just simply saying that same thing. Now we cannot be at the same level we were last year. And this is not even considering all the moves that have taken place in our division now. The Chargers gotten have gotten a better offensive line. The Broncos, who we've all said for the last 2 or 3 years was a quarterback away from being a strong contender, got a Super Bowl winner in Russell Wilson now. So they have a legit quarterback. They have a legit offensive system there.
And got a
The
legit defense.
the Raiders now, and I mean, you can laugh if you want about Josh McDaniels, but statistically, coaches who become head coaches for the second time do better than they did the first time. And it's been a long, long time since Josh McDaniels was a head coach the first time. But even then, he was the head coach of a team that had Tim Tebow as his quarterback, and they still went to the playoffs. So, let's
And
not
beat the
laugh at Josh McDaniels.
Steelers. And beat the Steelers.
And so, I don't think you can take them, you have to take them more seriously than you could with John Gruden there. Like, I wanted John Gruden to coach out the whole 10-year contract, because for the same reason I wanted Drew Lock to stay the quarterback of the Broncos. And not only have they upgraded, in my opinion, to head coach, but now they've traded for Devontae. So now that offense, you have Devontae Adams, arguably the best receiver in the NFL. who, I mean, he played college ball with Derek Carr, so they have that chemistry. You have Hunter Renfro, who is a fantastic route runner on that team. And I believe they still have Brian Edwards, who isn't a slouch. And by the way, they have a really fast tight end in Darren Waller. They still have the pieces in place to have a great. I mean, people are acting like this isn't a team that made the playoffs. People are acting like the Chargers weren't a team that was not calling a stupid timeout away, and ticking off the Raiders from kneeling down away from making the playoffs. The Broncos were a team that we've thought was a quarterback away from making the playoffs for the last few years. There are 4 teams in the AFC West that are legit playoff contenders as of today, March 19th. And on the one hand, it took us to play pretty bad football for half a season, right? And no one really ran away with the division. But on the other hand, it still took teams collapsing down the stretch for us to get up to the second seed. Um, and so, like, you kind of have to look at it in the middle. You can't be super optimistic and just say, you know, yeah, but we still got the second seed and completely dismiss the other stuff. You have to go somewhere in the middle there. And again, people were already saying the defense couldn't be stagnant. It couldn't be status quo. It had to get better. And instead, as of right now, it's gotten markedly worse. Your defensive line is right as of right now is at status quo because you have 2 of the same starters that you had last year, and you don't have the other 2. So at best, it's not any better than it was. Um, I think the linebacker position is fine. I don't think we're hurting that much if Neiman doesn't come back and we already cut Hitchens. People are going to argue about the safety position. I'm not going to argue into that. Would I feel better if Reed was actually Sorensen's replacement rather than Matthews' replacement and we got a better, safety out there? Yeah, I'd feel a lot better.
Landon Collins, offensively, I still feel kind of good. I mean, we're going to miss Darryl if we don't get him back. Thank God we're not getting back D-Rob. Please don't resign. Um, I guess I'm going to go with your puzzle picture and just say it's incomplete for me right now. And so this is one I probably have to come back to when it's all said and done. Um, and I know it's a cop out, but I'm going to do it anyway. Um,
How are you feeling about the Raiders and the Chargers and the Broncos?
I think the Broncos are going to, for years, it was the Chargers that were going to win the division. I think this year they're going to say it's the Broncos because of Russ and what Russ can do. Um, I think everything that they've done has been an attempt to stop the Chiefs. And the one thing that everybody seems to have shown, well, I won't say shown, the one thing that everybody is aspiring to or trying to believe is facts is that if you have the down lineman to rush and you drop 8 in coverage, you can stop the Chiefs. And that's the reality.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, and I haven't brought it up yet, but that's one of my biggest concerns right now with the way things stand with our offense because Cincinnati did not have a great defensive line by any means. They have one great pass rusher on that defensive line. They don't have a great defense by any means. Um, Jesse Bates is a fantastic safety who I think I said in a previous video would have loved to have him, but he got franchise tagged. Um, but outside of like Trey Hendricks and Jesse Bates, that whole defense isn't that great. And yet, by dropping seven and a spy, for whatever reason, they were able to get get in Mahomes' head and force the issues that we saw in not one game but two games. So I think it's fair to say that other teams are going to emulate that until the Chiefs show that they can stop it. Now, I think the big difference is going to be is that all the teams in our division now have two great pass rushers. So when they drop 7 or 8 into coverage, they're going to be able to get to Pat quicker. Now, on the flip side of that, this is trying to be balanced. On the flip side of that, our offensive line was pretty good, and a lot of Pat's pressure came from Pat himself. Like, he is the one. He is the key piece to this offense. He has a lot of growth to do this offseason. And I know that's going to be shocking and sound extreme to those who think that he walks on water, that he turns water into wine, um, he can raise the dead, you know, but the reality is he has a lot to work to do because this falls on him. It's going to be up to him to properly hand the ball off on RPOs. It's going to be up to him to audible to a run, when the box or lack of box suggests that he should be handing it off. Um, you know, it's going to be up to him to find the receivers who are open, which is, again, another counterpoint because even though the Bengals, even though they were dropping 7 and 8 into coverage, there were still receivers who were open almost every time. And so, but, again, that's counteracted by the fact that the rest of the AFC West is going to have better pass rushers, right? We the Raiders have what? They have Crosby on one side and Chandler Jones. Is that who they signed? On the other side now. The Chargers, as you said, have Bosa on one side and Khalil Mack now. The Broncos. Do the Broncos do anything?
No, but they still got,
Chubb.
yeah, Chubb.
I feel like they did something, but anyway, I mean, you still have to play those, against those guys, and the biggest problem though was Pat running, and he was running himself into pressure. We already talked about the Bengals' strategy of they were playing the run on first down and second and third and short. If it was like more than 2 or 3 yards, they figured the Chiefs were going to pass. And part of that comes on Andy and Eric recognizing their tendencies and working on those things. And so, after Patrick's growth this offseason, their growth as coaches, and I think, or at least I hope, this is the my optimistic side as much as I have one coming out. Hopefully, the extra pressure of having to be at your best to win shines through Pat and Andy and Eric. Because if it doesn't, I'm really concerned about the way the season's going to go because of the rest of the AFC West moves.
Well said, brother. Well said. We appreciate all you guys stopping in and watching us today. I'm hoping you're having an excellent day whenever this comes out. Make sure you check out the live stream on Mondays. Me and Keys are on Twitter, both of us. The Modfather's also there. Also, the RGR Discord. Um, Keys is in there a lot. I bounce in. Um, from time to time, I'm going to be more active in that, you guys, though. So hit me up with questions in there. You can leave questions, stuff you want us to talk about. Chief in the North on Thursday with Seth Kaiser. That's live. That's always a cool thing. Also, subscribe to his Substack. He does a lot of writing, you guys, that is really in depth and great. Support the All Juice team. That's the Therese Paler. The Therese Paler thing with the scholarship and for journalism. Get that shirt in the RGR store. We have film breakdowns. Big Chief Sean. We need to get in touch with Big Chief Sean again. We're all on there. Come check us out. Other than that, make sure you tell somebody you love them. We're serious about that. And have a good one. See you next time.
Peace out, guys.
Later.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.